I'm TC, and as you just saw, I made a racing game about cheating your way to victory for a game jam hosted by the wonderful Addy Valentines. Now, this is a part 2 to my last video, so for everyone who hasn't seen it, here is some context. I had just finished and submitted a game to the Pirate Software game jam with my friend instagalactix, and in total over 1,000 other games had been submitted. And so whilst we waited for our results to come in, which I will tell you about at the end of the video, I noticed that there was another game jam beginning in just over a week's time, and although I was reluctant to join it at first, I decided to give it a shot. And oh boy, am I glad that I did, as it led to the creation of one of my favourite games that I've ever made, a totally legitimate way to win races. Anyway, now that we're all caught up, it's time to crack on with the jam, starting with... Now, the concept for the game had to meet 2 criteria, one self-imposed and one externally set. The self-imposed criteria was that the game had to be a 2D game, because the last game jam I did was a 3D game, and I wanted to change things up a bit. The externally set criteria was the theme the game would have to follow. The theme itself was announced a few days before the game jam began, which allowed me to come up with some ideas early on and get cracking on the game as soon as possible. The theme itself was cheating, and this was my plan. The player controls a race car that competes against other race cars in a series of levels trying to win first place to get the cash prize that comes along with it. But the player is slower than the other cars, and he has to resort to other means in order to beat his opponents. The main way he does this is through purchasing certain gadgets and abilities through the black market, but I'll get into that later, as by this time the game jam had begun, and I had to get cracking. And of course, every game jam has to begin by creating... Alright, so this is a racing game, which means cars, which is a problem because I've never really messed with cars before in Unity. But I knew I wanted the driving to feel like the mobile game Hill Climb Racing, so let's get cracking. My first step was to go onto Google and find a tutorial about how to make a 2D car in Unity. And to my absolute delight, I found an excellent tutorial by Sasquatch B Studios on recreating the movement from Hill Climb Racing, and after implementing it and giving it some bounce, whoa, too much. After giving it some bounce and the ability to jump to stop people from getting stuck, we had the basic car. Well, at least the functionality of one. I promise it does get better than this. The next thing I added in was the ground that you drive on, which took a bit longer than expected. This is because usually when I create a 2D environment, I use a tire map to build out the level. But I found out very quickly that this wouldn't work for a racing game, as the grid didn't allow for much flexibility and the car kept on getting stuck. So I turned back to Google and immediately found that the same tutorial I used for creating the car controller also contained a section on creating a road which curved, which is exactly what I needed. So thank you very much Sasquatch B Studio for being the backbone for this entire project. And now that we have a car and a floor, the next logical thing to add would be the bots that you race against, but for some reason my sleep-deprived brain thought it would be a great time to work on the graphics and make everything look nice. So I guess that's what we're doing now. My inspiration for this game mainly came from Flash games that I used to play on the school computers at lunchtime, and so I decided to try and make the graphics in the same style, mainly this one. A bike racing game called Moto X3M, which has this little biker guy as his main character. But after spending too much time in A-Sprite trying to make a bike that I liked, I decided, screw it, I'm going to make the main character a rover instead. And so that's what I did. So allow me to introduce you to the rover. This remote-controlled nightmare is made entirely out of default Unity circles and squares, and took me way too long to make. And to make it better, I decided the other racers should have the exact same model. They may be asking, hey TC, how will the player be able to tell who they are in the crowd? Yep, I decided to make the enemies green for some reason, which is a very dumb decision. I mean, you would think that I would make the player green, as that's like the universal indicator for a good guy. But apparently, old me wasn't thinking straight, and decided to make this instead, so we're gonna have to settle with this for now. Anyway, moving on from that nightmare, now we need to make the ground. Now, you may be looking at this and thinking, wow TC, that looks like it took a lot of work to get looking that good. And if you're not, well then you're completely right. The entire floor is made up of 2 sprites that I made, each taking about 5 minutes by just scrambling and blurring some pixels in A-Sprite using the default tools. Work faster, not harder, am I right? I also made some background details, like this cactus and this dust ball, along with these nice rolling hills to go in the background. Just as a side note, whilst I did make these hills during the jam period, I ran out of time to add them, and so they were added in after the jam period, but I'm going to use them in the video because they look amazing and no one else can tell me otherwise. Now that we have all of the visuals out of the way, there are only a few more things that we need to get working before we can call the game complete. And the first of those things are the bots, which is great because I have no idea how to do bots, but luckily I knew someone who did. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you from my last video, Mr. Lazy T Studios, an amazing person who taught me everything I know about using enum state machines, which is how the bots are controlled. And now I'm going to try and explain to you how they work. Each bot has 3 states they can be in. the idle state, which does nothing, the moving state, which tells the bot to move forwards, and the stuck state, which makes the bot perform a jump. The bot can only be in one state at a time, and it can only move into that state when a certain criteria is met. For example, the bot will enter the moving state if it is on the ground, and the idle state when it is not. I was a bit worried that I was going to need more states than this to make the bots a challenge to beat, but after implementing and testing it, the bots are actually surprisingly good at the game, and a real challenge for me, the developer, to beat. So that's great, and also means that the bots are done. So thanks Lazy for explaining and helping me with this, and I hope I explained it well to you. Now, on to the fun stuff. When I made the initial plan for the game, I had 4 cheats planned: an oil slip, a mine, a boost pack, and a guided missile. But sadly, due to time restraints, I had to cut out the oil slip and focus in on the others. Starting off with the mine. It's very simple. You select it, press a button, and then a mine appears behind you. Then when anything drives over it, it applies a force in an outward direction, sending everything near it flying, including you, which can be pretty fun some of the time, but also fairly annoying at other times. Next up we have the guided missile, which had to be scaled back due to the time restraints into a non-guided missile. And also, due to an issue with my item selection script, you weren't actually able to use them. But they work like this. You select it, you press a button to fire it, and then it flies in a straight line until it hits something. Then, when it explodes, it acts in the same way as a mine, pushing everything out. And finally, we have the booster pack, which is fairly self-explanatory. You select it, press a button, and then boom, you get boosted in the direction you're travelling. The abilities aren't perfect, and they don't always function perfectly, and in some cases, they are just straight up broken. But I was under time pressure when making them, and I was trying to get as much done as I could, so they were never going to be perfect. But I might return to this project at some point and fix it. So I guess you'll have to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. You subscribed? Okay, great. Now, to finish off the abilities, I added in the black market, which is a panel on the level select screen. And speaking of the level select screen, yeah, I added one, along with 5 levels, a title screen, a win panel at the end of the levels, and the money that you win, which is basically everything the game was missing. And so all that's left to do now is to accidentally delete the black market an hour before the game has to be submitted, panic before remembering that there's an older and outdated version in a scene somewhere, find it and race to get it completed before the jam finishes, build the game and submit it 22 minutes before the jam ends. Then, wait for the jam to end, realise that the WebGL version is broken, fix it and then pray that you'll be allowed to upload the fixed build, get permission to upload the build, and then breathe a huge sigh of relief. Play the submissions, and wait for the results. I think it's time that I finally gave you the results. I mean, I've kept you waiting long enough. Starting off with the Addy Valentines Game Jamboree. For this jam, the entries were judged on 2 criteria: how well does the game match the theme, and how fun is it? In the first category, I ranked 10th out of 12 entries, which was alright, but I was hoping for better. But I think I'm alright when I look at how I did in the other category, because in the how fun is it category, I got 5th place, which is amazing and a huge achievement for me. So high five me. Oh wait, my arms don't move. Hi head! Here! Ooh, ow. Now for the Pirate Jam results. In this jam, our games were ranked on 4 categories, but the winners were chosen by the judges themselves. Now sadly we didn't get chosen, but this is how we did in each of the categories. Starting off with the bottom category, Tsea and I ranked 943rd, which isn't a great start, but I understand why, as the judges led a large amount of feedback on every game, which basically told us that they got softlocked in the first room, which makes sense. The game isn't the most polished thing in the world, and there aren't really any tutorials on how to do anything. But in the next category, we went up significantly to 426th place, which was a huge improvement. Moving up again, we ranked 109th in artistic style, which was incredible and incredibly uplifting and motivating for me, as I wasn't sure if anyone would like the style of the game. And finally, for the top category, cleverness, we ranked 93rd out of over 1,300 people, which is absolutely bonkers. I mean, I never thought we would get that high at all. Hi head! Here! Oh, I've got to stop doing that. Now, if you want to play either of these games, then there will be a link in the description, and I highly recommend that you go and watch part 1 of this series to see how I made the other game. I would like to say a massive thank you to Lazy T Studios for providing me with help for both of these jams. He also made a game for the Pirate Jam, along with deynum Studios, and that game did incredibly well and even got a mention from Pirate Software, so a massive congratulations to them. Also, thank you Addy Valentines and Pirate Software for hosting these jams. And finally, thank you, yes, you, for watching this video all the way through. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed making it, even though it has taken me about 5 months at this point. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!